Every step hurt her feet, but Laura did not stop. She held the empty jug close to her chest and kept walking through dry, cracked earth that had seen too much blood and not enough rain. The sun burned her skin, but she knew pain like a sister and hunger like a friend. What truly scared her were the beasts that moved in the dust just out of sight. She was small, thin, and only 16. Her mother had been sick for months, and no one in the village wanted to waste water on the dying, not when the wells were running dry. So every morning, Laura left the village alone, walked across the wastelands, and prayed she would return before nightfall, before the shadows came alive with teeth and claws. She had no weapons, only a sharp stick and courage that came from desperation. She whispered to herself to stay calm, to stay quiet, to stay unseen. The old ruins came into view. Broken towers bent under time, metal bones rising from the earth, where the last human war had been fought long ago. They called this place cursed. But Laura knew there was a pipe here, hidden under twisted steel, dripping with clear water. Not much, just enough for one day. She crouched near the rusted pipe, filled the jug slowly. Her hands shaking, she kept looking over her shoulder, listening to the wind. It was too quiet today, even the birds were gone. Then she felt it, the hairs on her neck stood up. Something was watching her. She turned fast and saw nothing but ruins. Then a low growl rolled through the air, deeper than any beast she had heard before. Out of the dust, something moved, long and thin, black scales and too many legs, a sandcrawler twice her size, its red eyes locked on her. She grabbed her stick, but her hands trembled. She stepped back slowly. Her breath stuck in her throat. She knew it would charge, and it did. The beast leaped toward her, its jaws wide open, its tongue like a spear. She screamed and fell backward. The jug slipped from her hand and shattered on the ground. But before the creature reached her, a loud sound cracked the sky. Boom! Something hit the beast's head. It twisted mid-air and slammed into the ruins, screaming in pain. Another sound. Boom! The creature's side exploded in blood, and it dropped hard, twitching its legs, curling like dying worms. Laura stared in shock, her ears ringing from the blast. She looked up. A figure stood on top of the ruins, his long coat blowing in the hot wind, his face hidden under a helmet. The mark of old Earth soldiers on his chest. He carried a large gun made of parts Laura had never seen before. It still smoked from firing. The stranger jumped down, landing in front of the dead beast. He looked at her, then at the broken jug. He walked past her, picked up a cracked metal container from the ruins, and without a word, crouched at the pipe, filling it with water. Then he handed it to her. She took it slowly, unsure if he was real. His hand was rough, covered in scars and burns. "But gentle, thank you," she said, in a whisper, but he did not speak, only nodded once and started walking away. "Wait," she called out. "Who are you?" He stopped, turned halfway, and said one thing, "Not your enemy." Then he disappeared into the dust like a ghost. Laura stood there, frozen heart, pounding mind. Racing, she looked down at the water container clutched in her hands. It was full and still. Warm, she looked at the dead crawler. Then at the path back home. Her journey had changed today, and she did not know how or why, but she knew one thing. Someone was watching from the ruins, and this time they had saved her. She began walking back to the village, her arms trembling from shock and her heart heavy with questions. Who was that man? Why did he help her? And why did he look at her like he had seen her before? She did not know, but deep inside she felt something had awakened, not just in the wastelands, but inside her too. And she was no longer just a girl fetching water for a dying mother. She was someone who had been noticed by a stranger with fire in his hands and secrets in his silence. Laura walked back into the village with the metal jug in her arms, but her mind was still in the ruins with the man who saved her. She had never seen a human before, not in real life, only in stories told by the elders, and those stories always ended in blood and war and fear. But this man was not a story. He was real. His coat was torn, his face hidden, and his gun was made of pieces that should not work together, yet did. She tried to explain what happened to her uncle, but he laughed and said she was imagining things no one would risk death for a poor girl with a dying mother. She did not argue. She just handed her mother the water and sat beside her. The jug rested on the floor, and her heart rested on confusion. That night she woke to a sound, something outside her small hut, footsteps, not like a villager, too heavy, too slow, too quiet. She stepped outside and saw him again, standing near the fence, his head tilted like he was listening to the wind, or the stars, or her. Heartbeat, she walked to him slowly, afraid but curious. She asked why he was here. He said nothing, just looked past her toward the sick hut, where her mother lay breathing like a broken bellows. Then he walked away again. No words, just steps that made no sound, yet shook her chest. The next day she went back to the pipe again. This time he was already there, sitting on a broken piece of metal with his gun beside him, and a strange device in his hand. He pointed to the pipe and stepped aside, letting her take water first. She hesitated, then crouched and filled the jug in. Silence, her eyes glancing up at him again and again. His face was still hidden, but today his gloves were off and she saw his hands. They were burned, covered in old wounds and fresh scars. One of his fingers was metal and twitched now and then like it had its own mind. She asked his name. He looked at her for a moment, then pointed at the sky. She asked if he came from space. He nodded once. She asked if he was a soldier. He shook his head, then nodded, then looked away like the answer was both and neither. Suddenly, a sharp cry came from the rocks. A second crawler, much larger than before, lunged forward, its mouth opening with a scream like metal tearing. Laura screamed and dropped the jug again, her eyes wide, her legs frozen, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. The man did not reach for his gun. Instead, he stepped between her and the beast, his arms loose, his feet firm, his eyes locked on the creature. The crawler charged full force, its claws slicing the air and dust rising like smoke. He moved like falling wind, fast and silent. His hand grabbed one claw and twisted until bone cracked. Then he punched the beast's head so hard its neck bent sideways like a twig. The crawler shrieked and tried to bite, but he jumped on its back, wrapped one arm around its throat, and pulled. The beast rolled, but he held on, twisting until something snapped and black blood spilled. On the ground it fell still. She stared at him as he stood over the dead beast, breathing slow and calm like nothing had happened. His clothes torn, his face hidden, but his silence loud. She walked toward him, her feet unsure, her voice trembling. She asked how he did that. He just looked at his hands and then at her and said one word. Trained. She wanted to ask more, but he turned and walked into the ruins again, leaving her with the water and a memory that would never leave. That night, she did not sleep. Instead, she stared at the stars, wondering what kind of training made a man kill with his bare hands and not blink. She wondered what broke him, who made him like this, why he saved her twice, why he stayed near her village, why he did not speak. The next morning, the elders saw footprints near the fields, and they panicked. They said a demon walked among them and ordered the scouts to hunt it. Laura said nothing. She just sat beside her mother and waited, hoping the stranger would not leave. Because in his silence, she felt something loud and strange and full of danger. And hope. The next morning, Laura woke to the sound of shouting in the village square. Her heart already knew the reason before her feet touched the ground. The scouts had returned with news. They found broken crawler bodies outside the ruins, their heads crushed, their blood dried in strange patterns across the rocks. They said it was the sign of a cursed weapon, something too powerful, too silent, too human. The elders gathered quickly, whispering to one another, their eyes full of fear and their hands clutching old charms, as if those would protect them from what they had never dared face. Laura listened from behind a tent as one elder said he saw a figure walking near the fields at night, tall, silent, wrapped in old war rags, and carrying a weapon with no name. They called him the Shadow of Earth. They said he was a ghost of the ancient war, a monster in the shape of a man, and they voted to hunt him. Before he brought ruin to their homes, Laura wanted to speak, to defend him, to tell them he saved her twice, but her voice locked in her throat and her courage shattered, like glass under boots. Her uncle was the loudest among them. He spat on the ground and said no human could ever bring peace, only death and destruction. They burn, they take, they vanish. He shouted, and everyone nodded. That evening, when the sun dropped behind the ridges, Laura slipped away with a basket in hand, pretending to gather herbs, but her feet carried her toward the ruins again. She found him where the shadows were longest, sitting on a rusted beam, sharpening a blade that looked older than the stars. She told him what the village planned, that they were afraid and ready to kill him, and he only listened without surprise, without anger, his face still hidden beneath that strange helmet. He stood slowly and handed her a small metal disc, glowing faintly like a heartbeat, and told her to keep it safe, not for him, but for herself. And her mother, she asked him why he helped her, why he never fought back, and he said one word again. Peace. That night, the hunters left the village with spears, blasters, and fear in their hearts. They walked into the wasteland under moonlight, following the trail of broken bones and scorched soil. Laura waited in silence. Her fingers clutched the metal disc tightly, as if it could protect her from what might come. Hours passed until the night exploded with a scream, not from a beast, but from a man. A sharp cry followed by silence, then another shorter, quieter. By sunrise, only one hunter returned, his face pale, his hands shaking, and his clothes stained with something dark and thick. He said they found the human. He stood there, unarmed, watching them from the rocks. They charged him, they attacked him, they shouted, they fired. But nothing worked. He moved like wind and fire. He broke spears with his arms, caught blaster bolts with his hands, and did not speak one word the whole time. He did not kill them all, only enough to send a message. The village fell silent for the rest of the day, eyes staring at the hills where the human now waited. The elders met again, this time whispering about leaving him alone, about offering tribute, about staying away. Laura stood outside her home, her mother weak and fading, calling her name, asking for water and peace and stories that did not end in blood. That night, Laura lit a candle, placed it near the window, and waited for him to come again, not to fight, not to speak, but just to exist in the dark. He did. He stood outside the fence for a while, unmoving like stone, like time itself, and then he turned and walked back into the wasteland where no one followed. Laura knew then that her village feared what they could not control and hated what they could not understand. But she did not fear him. She saw him, and in that silence that stretched between them like 1,000 stars, she made a choice. She would not let them take him because he was the only one who looked at her like she was not just a poor girl with a sick mother, but someone who mattered. Someone who was seen, someone worth saving. The relic stood deep inside the forbidden caves, buried beneath layers of stone and silence, its glow faint, but alive, like it waited for someone, or something, to wake it from sleep. No one in the village dared go near it, not even the bravest warriors or the greediest thieves. They told stories of what happened to those who tried, flesh-melting screams, echoing minds shattered by light. Laura had only seen it once from a distance when she was a child. Her mother dragged her away before she could ask questions and whispered, "Never look back, never speak of it, never return." But now the human walked toward it. She had followed him again, her steps quiet, her breath held. He did not stop her, he did not speak, he just kept walking. Like he had walked this path before, like the cave called his name. They passed bones, old and dry, half buried in the dirt, some still holding weapons, some clutching their own throats, eyes forever wide with terror. The relic pulsed. In the center of the chamber, a sphere of crystal floating above broken stone. It spun slowly, without sound, without heat, but with a strange pressure that made the air feel heavier with each step closer. Laura stayed near the wall, her fingers trembling, her voice lost her heart, screaming for him to stop, but her lips too afraid to say the words. He reached the relic, he reached out his hand, time held its breath. She remembered the old tale, the one where a man touched the relic and exploded into ash. The tale where an entire village vanished because a boy dared to whisper near it, but the human touched it. And nothing broke. Instead, the relic flared with light, bright and wild. The entire cave lit up like day. The stone walls shook. Dust fell from above. But no scream, no fire, no death. Instead, the relic sang. Not in words, but in pulses, in memory, in something deep that Laura felt in her bones, in her teeth, in her blood, like it reached into her past and her future, and pulled everything together for one moment. The human stood still, his hand against the surface, his body shaking not from pain, but from something else, something older than fear. Symbols appeared in the air, glowing, spinning, ancient marks from Earth, and beyond, languages dead for 1,000 years, dancing like fireflies around him. Then a deep voice echoed, not from him, not from her, but from the relic itself. Unit recognized, command, sequence unlocked. Last soldier protocol initiated. Laura gasped, the sound finally escaping her mouth, and he turned toward her, his helmet slowly lifting, revealing part of his face, burned, scarred, one eye silver, one eye dark and tired. He looked at her, not with anger, not with warning, but with sadness. He said, "It was never supposed to happen again." He said he had buried that part of himself long ago, in a war that ended with silence and betrayal and too many graves, but the relic had chosen him again, and now the galaxy would come looking. Laura asked what it meant. He said the relic was not a weapon, but a beacon, and it had been quiet for centuries, until now, until him, until her. They left the cave together, but not alone anymore. Something unseen walked beside them, something awakened, something waiting. When they reached the village, the sky was not the same. Dark clouds swirled with faint lights, blinking in patterns that should not exist. The elders saw it too, and their faces turned pale, their legs weak, their voices gone. They knew the stories, the old warnings, the ones buried under pride and fear and dust. The human had touched the relic, and now nothing would ever be the same. That night, Laura sat beside her mother, whispering the truth, not all of it, just enough, just the parts that felt real. Enough to share. The relic had sung to him, and she had heard it too. And though the village shook with fear, and the stars above whispered of change, she felt no fear anymore. Because the human who once walked alone, now walked with her. And the silence between them was filled with purpose, not war, not revenge, but something stronger, something that might save more than just her mother. The sky cracked open with silver clouds as the royal dropship arrived, its engines humming like 1,000 wings of metal and fire. The village elders knelt quickly, their faces pressed to the dirt. But Laura stood still, her eyes locked on the ship as it landed with a hiss of heat and power. The human stood beside her, calm, silent, his eyes hidden again behind that scorched helmet. His coat now cleaner, his blade sharpened and strapped to his back like a sleeping wolf. The ramp lowered, and the queen of the outer rings stepped out, her gown woven from stars, her hair like flowing light, her guards in dark armor surrounding her like a living wall. She did not speak at first. She only walked slowly toward the human, her eyes curious, her mouth curled in a smile that never reached her eyes. The elders crawled behind her, offering gifts, words, praise, but she ignored them. Her attention locked on the human who did not bow, who did not speak, who did not move. She said she had come for peace, for unity, for hope, but her voice dripped with honey, laced with venom, and every word was wrapped in power. She offered him gold from the core world's technology, lost to time, and even a private moon where he could rule as king. He did not answer. She offered more titles, land ships, warriors, even a personal guard of her finest trained killers, and a palace carved from crystal floating above the clouds. Still, he said nothing. Finally, she stepped closer, leaned in, and whispered that she could give him slaves if he wished, soldiers if he demanded, and silence if he required. He looked at her, then turned toward Laura. She met his gaze, and her heart raced, because in that one glance, she saw everything, not fear, not hunger, not anger, but a choice. He looked back at the queen, and spoke one word. No gasps echoed through the village. The queen's smile vanished, and her eyes turned cold. Her hand twitched near her waist, where a thin hidden blade waited. She asked if he knew what he had just refused, if he understood that denying her was denying the council, the throne, the entire galactic order. He nodded once and replied with words, sharp as broken glass. I did not come for power, I came for quiet. Came for healing, I came for her. He pointed to Laura, the queen. S' eyes narrowed and her voice lowered. She said the girl was weak, poor, unworthy. A nobody with dirt on her hands and no name in the stars. The human stepped forward slowly, each footstep like thunder on dry earth, and said she has more honor than your whole council. She gave. Without asking, she walked through blood for love, and she did not ask to be seen yet. I saw her. The queen's hand twitched again, but she held back her guards, moved, but a flick of her fingers froze them in place. She looked at Laura now, her gaze like fire, and asked what spell she had cast on the last soldier of Earth. What poison she fed him to make him speak with such fire. Laura said nothing. She did not need to, because her presence, her silence, her survival was the answer. The queen turned away, her gown flowing, her anger hidden behind her mask. Once more, she warned them both that choices have costs, that peace is never free, and that mercy is only given once. She stepped into her ship and vanished into the clouds. The village remained frozen for hours, the elders unsure, the warriors shaking. The sky slowly returned to calm, but nothing felt safe anymore that night. The human stood alone on the ridge, his blade glowing faintly from energy he had not used in years, his shoulders heavy, not from fear, but from the weight of choice. Laura walked up beside him, and for the first time, he removed his helmet fully, his face scarred, burned, aged, but not broken. She said, "Thank you." And he looked at her and said, "No thank you." Because for the first time in a long time, he had chosen not to fight, not to destroy, but to stand beside someone worth protecting. And the stars above seemed to breathe again. The night came too quiet, too still, like the wind itself had chosen not to breathe the dogs that always barked before. Moonrise were silent, the birds had vanished from the trees. The stars above blinked slowly, as if warning what was about to unfold. Laura sat beside her mother, listening to the shallow breathing, watching the shadows stretch across the floor like fingers reaching in slowly, silently. Waiting for the right moment to strike, she felt it first, a change in the air, a pressure like something crawling through the cracks in the walls, something that did not belong. She stepped outside the hut. The village was dark, the fires burned low, the air smelled of iron and smoke. Yet no flames danced, no smoke rose. Then she saw them. Figures slipping between homes wrapped in black cloaks, faces covered blades in hand, and eyes like wolves. They moved without sound, without hesitation, without mercy. Assassins. Not bandits, not beasts, but trained killers from the Queen's elite guards, sent without flag or honor, only purpose, death. Laura turned to run, but one of them appeared in front of her, his blade already raised, ready to end her with a single strike, but it never came because he was already there. The human stepped from the shadows, his coat torn, his face bloodied, one arm burned, one hand holding nothing. He did not need weapons, he moved faster than they could think. His fist shattered the first assassin's mask, his boot crushed another's throat. He spun with precision, each movement final, clean, brutal. Blood hit the walls, screams followed, only once before silence returned just as fast. Laura fell to the ground, crawling back as more assassins poured into the village from every direction. Blades, gleaming eyes, glowing, ready to claim her life and his soul. But he did not fall back. He walked forward. They surrounded him, but he smiled. They attacked. Together, blades flying in a deadly dance, but none touched him. He moved through them like smoke, like thunder, like a memory of war. He broke one's arm and used it to knock another down. He kicked one into a wall and cracked the stone. He slammed one into the ground. So hard, the earth shook beneath them. Laura screamed as one assassin grabbed her, pulled her back blade against her throat. It was cold and heartless. But the human stopped. He raised his hands slowly, his breath heavy, his body cut, bleeding, broken, but still standing. He told them to let her go. The assassin laughed, said he would if the human surrendered, if he knelt, if he begged. The human walked forward slowly, step by step, like a storm with legs. The assassin pressed the blade harder and told him one more step, and the girl dies. So the human ran in one blink. He crossed the space, grabbed the assassin's arm, twisted it, snapped it, and caught the falling blade mid-air. Then he stabbed the assassin with his own weapon. The body dropped, the blade clattered, and Laura collapsed into the dirt, sobbing. Shaking alive, but the fight was not over. More came from the hills, more shadows, more blades, more rage. He turned to her and said, "Protect your mother." Then stepped into the center of the village and stood alone. They circled. Him again, 50 now, maybe more, but he did not run. He closed his eyes and whispered something. The relic in her pocket began to glow. A pulse of light shot into the sky. A deep sound filled the air, like a drum, echoing across stars. Then everything stopped. The assassins froze, looking around, confused, scared, uncertain. The ground rumbled. The wind screamed, the sky split. And then the first drone appeared. A machine not built by aliens, not built by villagers, but by Earth itself, long ago, black and silver, floating with silent power. Its eyes locked on the human, and it spoke in a voice that shook bones. Command recognized defense mode. Active. Laura watched from behind a wall, holding her breath as the drone unleashed light and fire, destroying the Ustizioki remaining assassins in flashes of precision and fury. Not one touched the human, not one touched her again. When it ended, the drone hovered silently above the village, waiting. The human fell to one knee, not from weakness, but from pain, from memory, from the weight of protecting something he thought he lost forever. Laura ran to him, helped him up. He looked at her with tired eyes and said, "They will not stop now." She asked who sent them, why they wanted him dead. He said, "Because I said no, and that was enough for a queen to send hell." The village stood in ruins, broken huts, shattered walls, scorch marks across stone and earth. The silence heavier than ever. As the smoke rose from what remained, Laura sat beside her mother, holding her hand gently, watching the older woman struggle to breathe each breath. A battle each moment, a fading light. The human stood outside the hut, not moving, not speaking, the drone hovering above him, still waiting. Still watching, ready to defend or destroy at one word from his mouth. The villagers no longer spoke his name. They called him ghost or warburn or cursed, but no one dared face him. No one dared ask why the queen wanted him gone. Only Laura remained at his side. Her mother opened her eyes that night, weak and glassy, her voice faint as wind through grass. She looked at Laura, then at the figure outside, then back to Laura again. She asked softly, "Who is he?" Laura did not know how to answer. She spoke of the ruins of the crawler, of the assassins, of the fire in his hands and the quiet in his voice. Her mother listened, then nodded, as if hearing something deeper, something behind the words, something buried in her own past. She told Laura to bring him in. He entered quietly, knelt beside her bed, his eyes hidden again beneath the helmet, but his presence full of weight and silence. The mother stared at him long and hard, then raised one hand slowly and touched the edge of his armor. She whispered something ancient, something from a language Laura had only heard in lullabies when she was small, when the stars were still kind and human froze. His hands trembled, his head lowered, his breath caught in his chest as the name through the air and into the space between them. It was his name. Not a title, not a rank, not a number, but a true name, full of memory, full of pain, full of light. Laura felt the air shift, like something had awakened again, like the earth itself had listened and remembered the human. Looked at the mother, and his voice cracked as he spoke. "How do you know that name?" She smiled weakly and said, "Because you saved me once before." She told a story from long ago, when the war burned across galaxies, when her ship was hit, and she was left alone in a forest full of machines. And death, she told how a human soldier found her bleeding, how he protected her, how he carried her to safety through fire and darkness. And gunfire, she said, he never asked for thanks, never spoke more than he had to. just held the line and vanished. Laura stared in shock, her mind racing as the pieces fit together: the relic, the queen, the fear, the fire. This man was not just a survivor, he was a protector of legends. Her mother smiled again and whispered, "I never forgot your eyes, even behind the mask." The human removed the helmet, slowly revealing his face again, scarred, aged, tired, but real. Tears ran down his face, not loud, not shaking, just quiet, like old rivers returning to the sea. He said he thought everyone had died. He said he thought he had failed, but her survival, her daughter, her strength proved otherwise. The mother reached into her blanket and pulled out a small token, worn and cracked, a symbol of old Earth, a piece of a badge with the same mark on his chest. She had kept it all these years. He held it gently and his hands shook. Then she looked at Laura and said, "You are the second gift he gave me." That night, no words were spoken as Laura watched him sit beside her mother, holding her hand as she slept, her breathing calm for the first time in weeks. The drone hovered above the hut, silent now, like it understood something sacred was happening inside. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the ashes of the assassins into the sky like whispers into the void. And inside the hut, the human closed his eyes. And for the first time in years, slept without fear, because his name had been spoken. Because the past had returned, because he was no longer alone.